Hello and welcome to the Unit 1 Section 5 video on justifying steps. So up to this point we have been doing a lot of solving equations, and you know the reasons that you do each step as you solve an equation. So in this section we're just going to focus on writing down the justification for each step, and this is more so a review section, okay? So what you're going to do is look at how the equation is starting. You're going to look at the next step and see what has changed, and then you'll state what operation was performed to get that step, okay? And this is a listing of the steps that you have: combine like terms, the distributive property, and then you have four properties called the addition property of equality, subtraction property of equality, multiplication property of equality, and the division property of equality. All four of those are the steps that you take when you add something to both sides, or you subtract something from both sides, or you multiply something to both sides, or divide something on both sides. Those are the respective properties of equality. We say of equality because those steps happen on both sides of the equal signs. We're trying to keep the equation equal, so whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. So, with that little bit of introduction, let's go ahead and do some examples. So in this example, we are given all the steps used to solve the following equations. We need to just justify what they are. Okay, so this first step is our given. Okay, so if you are presented the given, we'll just say this is our given equation. Now, to get from the given to our first step is we distributed our 5 and our x and our 5 to our 2, which gave us our 10. So our step here was the distributive property. Okay. Then our second step, to get from here to here, well, we moved our 3x over and subtracted 3x from each side. So since we subtracted 3x from each side, this was the subtraction property of equality. Then we subtracted 10 from each side. That gave us a negative 18 on the right-hand side. So again, the subtraction property of equality. And then finally, we divided each side by 2. So we used the division property of equality. Okay, and that's all there is to it. Okay, so let's do another example. So for this one, we start with our given, and to get to our next step, we distributed this 3x and this 3 to the minus 2. So we use the distributive property here. Okay, and then we combine like terms. We combine the 3x and 5x on the left-hand side. So we combine like terms. Then in the next step, we started moving things from one side to the other. We subtracted 9x from each side. So we use the subtraction property of equality. And then we added 6 to each side. So then we did the addition property of equality. And then finally, we divided each side by negative 1. So we ended with the division property of equality. All right, let's look at a couple more of these. So in this one, we're starting with our given again. Now, nothing to distribute in this one, but we did combine like terms. We combined our 2 and our 2, so we combine like terms. Then we moved our variable to one side by adding 7m to each side. So since we added, we did the addition property of equality. Then we added 5 to each side. So again, we did the addition property of equality. And then finally, we divided each side by 3. And so we did the division property of equality. All right, next one. Again, we're starting with our given. Then we had to distribute to get rid of the parentheses, so distributive property. Then we combined like terms. The 3n to the 3n gives us a 6n, so combine like terms. And then we subtracted 12 from each side, so we used the subtraction property of equality. And then finally, we divided by 6, so the division property of equality. All right. So let's take a look at 2 last examples. And what we're going to do is we're going to solve the following equations, and we'll justify the steps that we used along the way. All right, so let's go ahead and solve this. So the first thing we have to do in this problem is we have to distribute. So let's go ahead and do that mathematically. So 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times negative 2n is going to give us negative 6n. And so now that we have this, we're going to say we used the distributive property. Now, the next thing we're going to do is combine this negative 3 and positive 3, which is going to give us 0. So we combined like terms. Then we can add 6n to each side. And that's going to give us 0 equals 0. And to get this, we got the addition property of equality. Okay? And of course, getting a solution 0 equals 0, we know that there are infinite solutions. That's what we learned in the last section, because we have a true statement. All right, let's look at the last example. Negative 7 times 8a gives us negative 56a. And then negative 7 times negative 7 gives us positive 49. And we don't have to change anything on the other side. So for this step, we distributed, so we used the distributive property. Okay? Now, we have nothing to combine, so let's go ahead and let's add 56a to each side. So that's going to give us 49 equals -3. And that's going to give us, what, 52? 52a. So we use the addition property of equality. Now we're going to add 3 to each side. And that's going to give us 52 on this side, 52 on this side. So this is, again, the addition property of equality. And then we divide each side by 52. And we get 1 equals a, and we got that from the division property of equality. Okay, so there's not really much new in this section. We're solving equations just like we have in all the previous sections. The only thing here is we're actually writing down what we did in each step. And it's important to know what you're doing in each step, because if you can justify what you're doing each step along the way, it helps you understand what you're doing, and it helps someone else understand what you're doing as well. All right, that's it for this section. Coming up in the next section, we're going to talk about solving literal equations.